On December 24, 1971, commercial aircraft moved routinely across South America's air corridors. One of those routes crossed eastern Peru, following a line above dense rainforest that stretched uninterrupted for hundreds of miles. From above, the Amazon basin appeared uniform and calm, a continuous green surface broken only by rivers that reflected light like thin metal seams. There were no landmarks visible from altitude that suggested roads, settlements, or human activity. The region was sparsely populated and difficult to reach by land. In many areas, river travel remained the only practical means of movement. LANSA Flight 508 departed from Jorge Chávez International Airport in Lima that afternoon, scheduled to fly to Pucallpa, a city located along the Ucayali River. The flight was not unusual. It carried passengers returning home for the Christmas holiday, along with crew members familiar with the route. The aircraft was a Lockheed L-188 Electra, a turboprop plane that had been in service for over a decade. At the time, the airline LANSA, Línea Aérea Nacional S.A., had already experienced multiple safety incidents, though the flight proceeded as planned. Among the passengers was Juliane Koepcke, a 17-year-old student traveling with her mother, Maria Koepcke. Juliane had spent much of her childhood in Peru. Her parents were German biologists who had relocated to the country to study its ecosystems. They had established a research station deep in the rainforest, known as Panguana, which required extended stays in remote conditions. As a result, Juliane was not unfamiliar with the Amazon environment. She had learned basic field survival concepts indirectly through her upbringing, though she had never been trained for independent survival. The flight ascended normally and cruised eastward. Weather conditions over the Andes were seasonal. December marked the beginning of the rainy period, when storms could form rapidly. Thunderclouds often developed vertically, rising to altitudes that commercial aircraft sometimes attempted to fly through rather than around. On this day, the flight encountered such a storm system. As the aircraft approached the cloud mass, turbulence intensified. Lightning activity increased around the plane. According to later investigations, the aircraft was struck by lightning while inside the storm. Structural failure followed. The right wing separated from the fuselage. The cabin decompressed. Sections of the aircraft broke apart at altitude. Juliane Koepcke remained strapped into her seat as she was ejected from the aircraft. She fell approximately 10,000 feet, still attached to a row of seats. The descent occurred through storm clouds and rainforest canopy. The seat assembly likely slowed the fall and altered its trajectory, though the exact mechanics remain uncertain. What is known is that she survived impact. When she regained consciousness, Juliane was lying on the forest floor. The rainforest canopy above her was partially broken. She had suffered a fractured collarbone, a torn knee ligament, and multiple lacerations. One eye was swollen shut. She was concussed. Her glasses were gone. Her shoes were missing. There was no sign of her mother or any other passenger. The Amazon rainforest at ground level is a closed environment. Light penetration is limited. Visibility is short range. The air is humid, and sound carries unpredictably. Juliane assessed her condition and surroundings slowly. She called out, but there was no response. The wreckage was scattered and largely inaccessible due to terrain. Drawing on advice she remembered from her father, Juliane made a critical decision. In rainforest environments, watercourses lead to human activity. Streams eventually connect to rivers, and rivers are used by people. Walking in a straight line through dense forest without tools often leads to disorientation. She chose to follow a small stream. Movement was slow. Her injuries limited her pace. Insects were constant. Mosquitoes and flies covered exposed skin. Maggots later infested one of her open wounds. She had no food. She drank directly from the stream. For days, Juliane walked downstream. She slept on the ground at night. Rainfall was frequent. Her physical condition deteriorated. Infection spread in her injuries. She experienced exhaustion and periods of confusion. She later described a lack of hunger after the first few days, replaced by weakness. After approximately 9 days, Juliane encountered a small shelter used by loggers. Nearby, she found a motorboat tied along the riverbank. There was fuel stored in a container. Remembering her father's instruction that fuel could kill parasites, she poured gasoline into her infected wound. The pain was severe, but the maggots emerged. She remained at the site, conserving energy. Several days later, local loggers returned. They recognized her condition and transported her by boat to a nearby settlement. From there, she was taken by aircraft to a hospital in Koepcke. Search efforts for Flight 508 had already been suspended. All other passengers and crew were presumed dead. Juliane Koepcke was the sole survivor among 92 people on board. Her survival attracted international attention. Investigations later confirmed the cause of the crash as lightning-induced structural failure combined with inadequate weather avoidance. LANSA ceased operations the following year. Juliane recovered physically over time. She later returned to Germany, pursued a career in biology, and continued research related to rainforest ecosystems. She revisited the crash site decades later with documentary teams, providing factual accounts without embellishment. The survival of Juliane Koepcke remains one of the most documented aviation survival cases in history. It is notable not for dramatic rescue or extraordinary physical feats, but for the intersection of circumstance, prior environmental familiarity, and methodical movement in an otherwise lethal environment. The Amazon rainforest remains largely unchanged in its scale and isolation. Aircraft still pass overhead. Rivers continue their slow movement toward the Atlantic. For most who enter without preparation, survival remains unlikely. In this instance, one individual endured not because the environment softened, but because she adapted to it long enough to be found. Her survival does not alter the risks of flight through storms or the dangers of remote wilderness. It stands instead as a record of endurance under conditions that allowed little margin for error, documented carefully and remembered without excess. The rainforest closed behind her path, as it does for all who pass through it. The ground shows no permanent sign of the fall. The event remains preserved only in records, memory, and the quiet continuation of the landscape beneath the sky.